So welcome back to our regular classes. I thoroughly missed seeing all of you over the last 3 weeks, and I'm looking forward to this series. I hope everybody is doing well and staying safe wherever you are. We'll get started with the invocation, and then I'll introduce the topic. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Ramo Rajamanis Sada Vijayate Ramam Ramesham Bhaje Ramena Bihata Nishacharachamu Ramaya Tasmai Namaha. Raman Nasti Parayanam Parataram Ramasya Dasosmyaham Rame Chittalaya Sada Bhavatu Me Bho Rama Mamuddhara. Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Vidwaram Sadgurum Brahma Vidwaram. Hari Om, everyone. The text that we'll be seeing for our Saturday sessions is Tattva Bodha. Many of you might have studied Tattva Bodha before and also studied it several times. But I think that every time we study a text, it reveals something new if we have that eye to look in for it. The new understanding that we have gotten from later text, it always helps to come back and see, oh, such a deep thing was said, even in an introductory text like Tattva Bodha. Tattva Bodha is considered as one of the elementary texts of Advaita Vedanta, the introductory text of Advaita Vedanta. And the reason why it is elementary is not that, Tattva Bodha has some different type of knowledge or the knowledge given in Tattva Bodha is elementary. Nothing like that. The reason it's called an elementary text is because it introduces us to terminologies and definitions in Vedanta. So whenever we go to a teacher and the teacher is giving some kind of upadesha, some kind of teaching, the only medium with which the teacher can instruct the student, Shastras can instruct the student, is by using words. And more precision we have in the terminologies of Vedanta, better is the tuning of the student with the teacher. So words such as Sukshma Sharira. So when the teacher uses the word Sukshma Sharira, the student should have a very precise understanding what is this Sukshma Sharira referring to. So that role is done by Tattva Bodha. Very, very precise definitions are given, and it helps in this tuning of the student. And this is true with any discipline or science that we study. They have their own vocabulary. Imagine there is some kind of a surgery going on and the doctor is standing there and he has his interns and other doctors standing around him. Now, if the doctor needs, the forceps, there is a very specific word for that. And if the intern doesn't know, the doctor will use that word and the intern will show different scissors, this one, this one, this one, this one. So communication is not happening properly because terminologies are not clearly understood. So doctor is saying something and this intern is understanding something else. So in the same way, Vedanta also has very specific terminologies, and Tattva Bodha will help us get familiar with it. So those of you who are new to Vedanta, this is a perfect text to start. Some might have already studied Vedanta. This is still a very good text to come back to because you'll realize there are a lot of gems hidden in Tattva Bodha. So we will see as we unfold the topic, we will look at all those aspects. Tattva Bodha, the word literally means knowledge of the essential nature. Tattva means essential nature of something, and Bodha means knowledge of that thing. So if you take, for example, different types of candies, you say, what is the tattva in that thing? What is the essence of all these different candies? We say sugar is that essence. Sweetness that comes in each and every candy is coming from that sugar alone. In the same way, all sources of happiness that we are familiar with, it is said, the essence of all those sources of happiness is Atma. Chaitanya Swarupa, which is our true nature, that is where we have to go. That is this word tattva, and knowledge of that, how to go there, that is described here, tattva bodha. Bhagwan Shankaracharya is going to say that I will tell you what is the method of inquiry. Then you can walk this path for yourself. I am here just to show you the path. That is the beauty of Vedanta. The teacher does not want to handhold the student, although they do it sometimes, very compassionately, patiently, they keep on explaining. But the purpose is to show us the path and then tell us, this is what we have followed. If you want, you can also walk this path. That is what is said in this text called as Tattva Bodha. I like this picture because it conveys many Vedantic concepts. I will mention, and you can think about more. In every class, we will picture in the beginning, so you can think about what is this picture telling us. What is real over here is that moon and that tree which is there. And what is being seen is that reflection. Calmer the water, clearer is the reflection right here. But our purpose is not only to look at the reflection, our purpose is to look at the original. Then only we can say knowledge is complete. So Tattva Bodha will do this. It will give in the beginning a lot of sadhana. Sadhana Chatushtaya it is called. We are familiar with outer wealth, right? Tattva Bodha will talk about inner wealth, with which our life will become more calmer, more confident, more efficient in our vyavahara also, in our transactions also. That portion will come in the beginning of Tattva Bodha. But merely quietening the water, having a clear reflection, Vedanta says that is the first step. The purpose of doing that is to go towards the source. Tattva is that original. Our nature as pure consciousness is the tattva that we have to get clear idea, clear knowledge about, and everything else will help us to do that. That was one aspect. There are many more aspects, but I won't go into that because purpose of bringing this picture was not for that. It was just to introduce the concept of Tattva Bodha. Whichever text of Vedanta we study, this question, if we ask ourselves, we will benefit a lot, and our value or Mahatva Buddhi, the importance that we have in studying Vedanta, will increase. Otherwise, we forever have this question, what are we seeking in life and why should we study Vedanta? So in the beginning of this text, we will try to think about this question and inquire about it. We have done it before also, but more we think in different ways, it benefits a lot. It gives clarity about what is the big picture idea of Vedanta and how is it relevant to my life. So the big, broader question that we ask is, what are we seeking in life? And unanimously, no matter what our immediate pursuit is, ultimately it will end up with this answer that I am seeking happiness in my life. And it is not only us as human beings, even animals, plants, creatures, even as small as an ant. You see, sometimes on the wall, they are walking in a straight line, so disciplined their walking is. It's very interesting to see. And you just, bring some obstacle in between or, put something. It's as though they look at you and say, what is your problem? And then they go around it. Even other animals, if you show fear, if you show them fear, they run away. That means what? Even without lot of training and lot of information, Jiva is able to understand that our pursuit of life is to find happiness. But there is something unique about human beings, which Gurudev is to say, causation hunting is the preoccupation of human intellect. So if our goal or pursuit in life is happiness, we are endowed with this faculty of thinking that what can I do so that I can get happiness? That is the cause hunting that we as human beings are capable of doing. And we will take the support of Pujya Gurudev's BMI chart. So that way we'll get familiar with the chart also, and we'll be able to do this initial inquiry about what are we seeking in life and what is the relevance of Vedanta in that quest. So that E and T in Gurudev's BMI chart will come up with the chart, but right now emotions and thoughts, okay, those two letters are there. And emotions that we want to have in our heart for most of the times is a happy emotion. Nobody wants to have sorrow as the predominant emotion in the heart, right? So happiness is what we are seeking. So now we'll do a little more of causation hunting. When can I say I am happy? When can I say I am happy? If happiness is what I am seeking, what is the cause of happiness? Causation hunting. By the way, I have come up with a way of annotating, so I'll have the fun of annotating over here some things. Wherever needed, we will do it. So causation hunting is what we are seeking right now. Let me try to get this thing out of the way. Okay. So for happiness, the immediate thing that we see in our life is conducive or favorable situation gives happiness. This we cannot deny. Whatever is conducive to our lifestyle, you say, interest, that particular situation when it is there, I am happy. It starts with basic needs. Food, clothing, all those things, if they are there, then there is happiness. Once that is fulfilled, we go to something higher, what we call as luxuries. And we cannot deny this fact that if they are there, they give happiness. We should try the opposite of it and then see whether we can deny that fact. If there is lot of physical discomfort, physical pain, hunger, that is not a good state to be in. So the immediate cause that we tie to our happiness is objects. So in Gurudev's chart, the bottom line is called objects, emotions, and thoughts. So I am seeking happiness. The immediate cause of happiness that we generally understand is favorable situations. Paristhiti, this is the word, paristhiti in Sanskrit if you want to note it down. And paristhiti could be several things. It is not only objects all the time. Conducive situation includes everything. Good relationships with people is also a conducive situation. Good sleep is also a conducive situation. All those things are favorable situations. But now we ask the next question. These situations are there, no doubt, but we realize they don't remain the same all the time. No matter how much we try, how much efforts we put in, we might have an insistence that this situation should remain like this only. This object should remain like this only in the same way. But we realize it doesn't remain that way. It keeps changing. Something is there which is deciding how these situations will act, how these situations will present in our lives. Causation hunting, just looking at the effect, tells us that there should be something more because of which there is this fluctuation of situations in our lives. That it makes us to go to the next question. How do situations get shaped in our life? Where did we come from? First was happiness, right? This was the first thing. Then we came to favorable situation. This is the second one. And now we come to the third one. What is it that is the cause of situations in our life? That we say it is karma. And we should remember, karma performed not only in this life, but also in previous lives. So I can create a situation based on some karmas that I have performed in this life, but whether or not that situation will stay, for how long it will stay, what experience it is going to give me is not decided only based on that situation. It is decided based on karma, not only of this life, but of all previous lives. So just now that example, what we saw, right? We can have a very comfortable living place. A bed can be very comfortable. But whether or not I will get sleep in that bed, it is said sleep is based on karma phala. Relationships that we have with people, all of that is based on karma. So according to the karma, we get karma phala, which is in form of situation, circumstances around us. And for us to do karma, what we need is these equipments. This portion in Gurudev's BMI chart, that is the equipment with which we can do karma. Not only do and enjoy the results of karma also. If you want, you can include these two portions also, emotions and thoughts. They are also part of this individual. Okay, so B stands for the body, M for the mind, I for intellect, P is the perceiver who is perceiving these objects, getting inputs, feeling emotions, and thinking thoughts. So with this equipment, we are performing karmas, and with karmas, we get situations in life. Now, what has karma become now? Karma has become the cause, situations have become effect. And what does that situation give? Emotions, right? And what we are seeking is happiness. Happy emotion is what we are seeking. This is a great stage in our sadhana, in our maturity, to understand that if I want happiness and favorable situations, I have to take care of my karma. If we do good karma, favorable situations will come unasked. We don't have to run after favorable situations, they will come unasked. And there is a ordainer, Bhagwan, who is karma phaladata, who will make sure that right results of karma come to us. So this is the karma theory, and it should give us a lot of confidence and should take away a lot of anxiety. Anxiety most of the times is about karma phala. What is going to happen to this result? So Bhagwan gives us this assurance that you focus on karma right now, make sure that karmas are good. The result of karma, which is paristhiti, situation in our life, that will be very well taken care of. Okay, this is the whole purpose of discussing this point. What are we doing? Cause effect, hunting. Happiness took us to favorable situation, that took us to karma. Now, next question we should ask is, why are we prompted to do karma? Does karma also have some cause, or is it randomly happening? And when we inquire, we realize our actions are not random. They are prompted by something called as desire. And this is what takes us to the next step in Gurudev's VMI chart, which is vasanas. Okay, this is the V that he had. Based on that, we end up doing karmas, okay, which is here. And based on that, we try to create favorable situations. But we should remember, not every time we'll be able to do it in that way, because a lot of other karmas also keep on interfering. And with that, we are seeking this happiness at very transactional level. And each one has its own importance. So Vedanta is always not about directly talking about Brahmananda, ignoring our current way of living. So it's a gradual, systematic thought process. The first step of climbing in this ladder is karma. Okay, karma should be good. That will create good situations. Next step above that is to ask the question, why am I prompted into karmas in the first place? So then the cause becomes desires, because of which we are prompted. Now, one interesting point about desire is we actually don't have control over which desire will sprout at what time. And this we should see for ourselves. We are sitting in a class, listening to Vedanta. Somewhere some thought comes and just sprouts. Not that we wanted it. It just sprouts. There is no reason why it has happened that way. So sometimes it looks as though we are just flowing in this river. Continuously, vasanas are getting pushed as though inside us, which is prompting us to do karma and then create some situation. And this we notice in ourselves many a times. We are sitting, studying something, suddenly one desire comes, maybe I should drink some coffee. From nowhere, and it has prompted me into karma. I have left what I was doing and went to drink a cup of coffee. The point here is, vasanas, they are very subtle. Rather, they are unmanifest. Only way we can catch hold of vasanas or understand what vasanas are there inside us is by being very alert about what kind of thoughts are there inside us. That is the only way. The prayer is that Tanmanaha Shiva Sankalpamastu. Means Bhagwan, may you prompt auspicious vasanas. Only you can do it. I cannot do it based on my strength. So then the question would be, so are we helpless all the time? So Bhagwan is very compassionate. Although his structure is in this way that desires are getting prompted even without us wanting it to be, he has given us a faculty by which we can regulate those desires. That is called the intellect. No doubt, vasanas are getting prompted and so on. But when it becomes a thought, we have full freedom. What we want to do with that thought? Do we want to hold on to it, or do we want to let go of it? That is the role of intellect, which will keep doing this decision and telling us what we should hold on to and what we should let go of. And better or sharper is this faculty of this intellect, more productive we are, more control we have of our own life. Not somebody else's life, our own life. This is the role of intellect, where it helps us make the wise choice. What I keep and what I should let go of. It's a great sampatti. All of it, elaboration will be done in Tattva Bodha later, but we should understand that, intellect is a great gift Bhagwan has given us to build and shape our personality. Stronger we make the intellect, easier it becomes to hold on to the right things and let go of other things. Like this desire which just came, right, about coffee or something. Before it becomes an action, if mind is able to correct it at thought level, then mind becomes more stronger. So that is the role of intellect. Okay, more elaboration we will see when it comes. Okay, so cause effect hunting we are doing. What became the desire, the cause of karma? Desires. And with the help of intellect, we are able to have auspicious desires. Okay, so vasanas, there is something called as Shubha Vasana. So Vasana is not always a negative thing. Vasana to come to satsang, it is also a vasana. It has also prompted our mind to do something. It has prompted us to let go of so many other things we could have done at this time and come to satsang, to attend study groups, to do sadhana on ourselves, by ourselves, right? Japa sadhana. All of that is samskara only. All of that is vasana only. But how has that vasana come? It has come by repeatedly making the right choice. That is what we saw as role of intellect. I always had two choices, but even in the beginning, if I did not like, I went with what was the right choice. And gradually, this intellect became stronger and Shubha Vasanas were cultivated. And when that happens, it makes us go to a next step. And that is to ask why desires are there in the first place. Where did we have these desires to begin with? So that takes us to the last step of our journey, which is to understand this fact that there is an inherent understanding or misunderstanding, you call, that I am lacking something right now. Right now, I am incomplete. That ignorance makes us have desires, vasanas. That prompts us into karma. And with that, we start everything else, situations, adjusting, and then seeking happiness out of those situations. So Vedanta's purpose is to reveal to us this top aspect of our personality, that we are Ananda Swarupa to begin with. Completeness is our true nature to begin with. Not knowing that, we have mixed it up with something else, and then we are trying to adjust those things to get infinite happiness. So this method of thinking, this analysis, we should keep doing over and over again. What is Vedanta going to tell us? What is Vedanta going to reveal to us? Then only we will have Mahatva Buddhi in Vedanta. So Vedanta, if we need to fix paristhiti, right? Situations in our life, not of knowledge in those things. We can make those decisions with our data that is available, information that we have. And that is important. It has its own role to play. Every time we cannot use Vedanta to make decisions in Vyavaharik life. So that is our first one. If we have doubts about karma, which karma I should do so that I will get good results. Vedanta, the fundamental purpose of Vedanta is not in karma also. There are different sadhanas which are mentioned. If we have question about desire management, how should I have good desires, Shubha Sankalpa? That is not the fundamental topic of Vedanta. It is covered in Vedanta, not that it is not covered. But those are all preparations for us to ask the fundamental question, what is our true nature? Do I need to seek happiness or am I happiness? That is the question Vedanta wants to ask. All of us start as jijnasus, some curious seekers. And initially we don't have this question about absolute source of happiness or anything. We should see for ourselves, where did we start? The question that comes to a seeker in the beginning is there something more to life than fulfilling desires? Because the nature of desires and the situations that are created by those karmas and desires, fulfilling them, they seem to be very flimsy. Flimsy in the sense, it doesn't stay for too long. Keeps changing all the time, and a lot of effort is put in trying to maintain it in a stable situation, in a stable condition. It looks like that soap bubble, just like in this one. No doubt it is there, no doubt it is getting reflected. But it's only a matter of time, entire thing changes. This we have to see it in our own life. Situations that seemed so real not too long ago, just a year ago, it looks like a dream today. Forget about childhood. Childhood we don't even remember. What seemed so real, so important, and we put in so much effort also, that does not have the same kind of importance today. So is there something more that we have to seek in life? That is a question that most jijnasus will start with. Then when we do satsang, Shastras themselves will come and say that there is something called as eternal source of happiness. Then this question gets refined. We know what we are searching then. Then the question becomes, is there something which is an eternal source of happiness? Right now I'm familiar with many other sources, but now we are seeking something, if there is, which is eternal. So I hope everybody is with me so far. Where did we start with causation hunting, Gurudev's BMI chart? Again, that chart will come, but it's a very beautiful way in which Gurudev has presented what is our pursuit and what is Vedanta going to tell us. Now, if somebody says, okay, you told me that there is some eternal source of happiness, and it is my own true nature, that also I have heard, but I don't feel that way. So the question becomes, how can I turn towards this eternal source of happiness? It's very inspiring if we understand the import of this word, eternal source of happiness, something which is available to me all the time. But the question is, how do I turn towards it? This Halloween pumpkin that we have, it's a beautiful example, which is given in Dakshinamurti Sotram also. Their pot is taken, but we can take Halloween pumpkin. Vedanta wants to tell us, in this entire creation, there is only one source of happiness. That is our own Ananda Swarupa, Brahma. That happiness gets reflected in our mind. And nimitta for this happiness to get reflected is so many other things. Either it is situation or some kind of good, when we have near and dear ones telling us, spending time with us, giving us love, that is a source of happiness. What Vedanta wants to tell us, they have become nimitta, source of that sukham is Atma alone. That is what we have to search, and in that light, see all other sources of happiness. So this is that journey of a seeker. Okay, next we will come to that point. But what Vedanta wants to tell us is, we might think happiness is there in so many other things, right? Good food, some kind of rasgulla is there. There also I see happiness. What Vedanta says, it has come from that same lamp. In this pumpkin, we see that, different holes are there. And then we see that there is different light that is emanating from each of this source. It says, no, it is not different light. It is that same lamp which is there inside, which is giving out these lights. That is what we have to search, not stay only at the, eye level. In this example, reflected happiness level, that is not where we have to stay. Go to the source. So like this, we have several experiences in our life, going to a good scenery, seeing nature, that also gives sukham. But our quest is to find what is the source of that sukham. Because this reflection is such, the moment rasgulla is eaten, it is gone. No matter which great place I have gone for vacation, end of the day, I have to come back to my house. So if I say happiness was there in that place, coming back from that place has become source of sorrow for me now. I'm sure many of you might be agreeing, going back to work just now. But the point of Vedanta is not to say that there is happiness in a unique place and time. Point of Vedanta is to point out happiness is our nature, whether I'm at work, I'm vacation place, or even in the midst of a battlefield. That is why Bhagavad Gita was given to Arjuna in the middle of battlefield. Different sources of sukham, the essence of it, source of it, is what we have to search. This is what Bhagwan Shankaracharya ji says in Manisha Panchakam. The last verse is beautiful. It says, Yat saukhyam buddhilesha leshata ime shakradayo nirvritaha. It is this Ananda Swarupa, which is our own true nature, a drop of which, in that drop of that Ananda, all great devatas, they revel in it. The first line, Yat saukhyam buddhilesha leshata Lesha means a small portion. And this is my own true nature, our own true nature. So it has to become available to us. So mind has to be quietened. Yat chitte nitaram prashanta kalane labdva munir nivritah. In this Muni or yogi is able to quieten the mind from other sources of sukham. Because his quest has become different now to exclusively find out what is that ultimate source. That is the second line. Yasmin nitya sukham budhau galita dihi. Important word to note here is nitya sukha. It is not naimittika sukha. Naimittika sukha could be so many things and that we are familiar with. But this Jijnasu is seeking nitya sukha. Yasmin nitya sukham budhau galita dhihi. Galita dhihi means it will take time. It is not an immediate thing that will happen in our personality. It needs efforts. Brahmaiva na brahmavita. Knower of Brahman, knower of this source of sukham, does not call himself to be knower. He becomes that. I think there is nothing in this creation knowing which you become that thing other than Brahman, our own true self. Other than that, everything else, after knowing it, we have to do something and we won't become that thing. This we will become because it is our own nature to begin with. Right? After knowing our true nature, not that we will become of that kind. We were already that to begin with. We took ourselves to be those, light holes that are coming out. Or instead of that light, we took ourselves to be the pumpkin. Pumpkin means his body. In Dakshinamurti Sotram, that is how it is said. Body is like that pot which has different holes. From that, knowledge is coming out, ability to know and all. So, erroneous understanding, correction is the purpose of Vedanta. And what is the glory of this, Brahmavit? Yah kaschit sasurendra vandita pado nunam manisha mama. Even devatas worship this person who has realized their own true nature. Iti nunam manisha mama. Manisha means strong conviction should come. Manisha means that. Manisha is firm conviction in this knowledge that I am Nitya Sukha Swarupa Chaitanya. So we'll pause here. This was just an introduction, and then we will see how this journey moves on forward of the seeker, and then we will go into Mangalacharan Shloka of Tattva Bodha. Lot of concepts will come, lot of different points will be explained gradually. Okay, so we will take our time in those. There are some announcements and one more thing I want to share, but we'll do the concluding prayer and then go on to that. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. So one of the things about studying Vedanta is Shravanam, right? Listening to all these ideas, and they look very good when we listen to it. It also seems that, oh, everything is clear now. I have no doubts. And I have seen in myself, everybody has to see for them. If somebody comes and says, can you recap the lecture? You say, oh, recapping, how many points do you want? And you scratch your head and finally you come up with 2 points out of 45 minutes lecture. And that happens to all of us. That is why Gurudev has given a beautiful platform of how to study. He said, first do Shravanam. And on that, like-minded seekers, sadhakas, who are our best companions on this path. they should come together and try to discuss on those ideas, share their own insights, what they have understood. And that helps, the group also. Many times we realize somebody else has understood it in a better way than how I had understood this. Some more insight is there. So with that in mind, we will be starting some study groups for new members. So that is the whole purpose. Those of you who might be studying Tattva Bodha the first time might not be familiar with these terms, terminologies, which is very good. And you are interested in knowing more. That is all is needed over here. And of course, our Q&A sessions, everything will go on. In addition to that, there are some new initiatives that we are planning, and Jignesh Bhai. Yeah, that was the only question I saw. And if there are any questions about the class today, we can take a few. We have a couple of more minutes. And our Google form for submitting the questions is also online. So as most of you did in the last sessions, please do continue doing that, asking whatever things were not clear. That helps me also stay connected and cover relevant things in the lecture also. I used a word called as nimitta. Nimitta means the cause. That which becomes the reason for something is called as nimitta. What is a good example for nimitta? Sun rays are there. Sun rays by themselves don't have different colors. You bring a prism in between, then that same sun ray becomes 7 different colors. So that prism has become nimitta. It has become the cause for those 7 colors to show up. So that was the cause hunting that Gurudev talked about, that if you are seeing an effect, which is only a result, thinking about what is a nimitta for this. When that thing is there, this result is seen. When that thing is not there, this result is not seen. So that is called as nimitta. Okay. Vasanas are unmanifest and manifest as thoughts. Is that correct? That is why we can only know our vasanas by observing our thoughts. Yes, because vasanas are unmanifest, we don't know what are those inherent tendencies. But we can infer them based on manifest thoughts. Okay, that is the only way for us to know vasanas and also purify those vasanas. We don't have direct access to vasanas, right? So that is the purpose of being alert about thoughts and using the intellect to encourage, to strengthen the right thoughts. Good. And the purpose of increasing the timing for all these classes, in addition to what Jignesh Bhai said, is that will give us, this ability to go at a healthy pace. Means we can cover topics in a better way if it is 45 minutes. And we have to, the next portion that will come in Drig Drishya Viveka is meditation portion. So after that, we'll move on to the next text. And for both of them, this timing is helpful. That is why we went ahead with it. All right, so we'll pause here. If there are other questions, you can please, submit it in the Google form so that we can take it up in the next class. Okay, Hari Om everyone. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Hari Om.